Okay. So hi, Abhishek. So we're going to get started on the session on securing and enjoying your retirement. And today's session is going to be on the second template, which is this balance sheet part here. And so very quickly, it's like if you prepare your balance sheet, and balance sheet may not be the correct term to use, but I think it's the closest because we'll be looking at your liabilities, your assets, and also one other thing as to your protection. That is your insurance policies and things like that. So one is that it's pretty important for people to prepare their balance sheet and update it annually so that they can review all their assets and liabilities and protection and to see what actions they might want to take on each item. Also, what is kind of nice is that you can create links to specific asset items in your balance sheet. And, you can then say if something were to happen to you, then your heirs will be able to have all the documentation there. Hi, Madhuri, welcome. We've just started the session. Okay, yeah, great. So I'll keep pausing in the middle, and if you have any questions or any time, you can raise your hand, right? But we're going to be talking about the second template balance sheet today. Okay, so let me jump into a sample of what I mean by a balance sheet. So right at the top, you'll see an as of date, right? So this, in the sample, the date is 31st December 2023. So this tells you that it's a snapshot of this person's position as on that particular date. And like I said earlier, you want to be able to update this balance sheet of yours annually, right? So you could decide what is a good frequency for you. Do you want to do it in January? Do you want to do it in April? End of the financial year is March, end of the calendar year is December. But you set your frequency and update it. And during the year, there may be certain action items that you put against each of your liabilities and assets and protection that you may want to act on. Right. So what we'll do is then we'll go to this liabilities part. So when we talk about liabilities, these are mainly loans or EMI or this now fairly famous term called buy now, pay later, right? I like to call it buy now, suffer later. So because it ends up making you buy things that you probably don't need, and then you have to pay for them over time. So in liabilities, it's good to understand that there is good debt and bad debt. So what do I mean by good debt? So when is borrowing good? So for instance, you want to buy a house. You cannot afford to buy the house outright because you don't have the cash. So you take a mortgage and you make a down payment, and then you're able to buy that house and pay it off with your income. You also get some tax reductions along the way. Now that is a kind of a good loan. Most of the, say if you invest in education, educating yourself or your children or whatever, then these may be good loans. Now, in terms of educating your children, it may be a good idea for the children to take the loans and maybe for you to guarantee them so that they understand that these loans are things that you expect them to pay back. Now, this I know is not very common among Asian parents, but at least a lot of Caucasian parents and things, they believe that, the school is free in the US, but college, they believe that people should pay for it because then they'll choose the right college and see whether it makes sense to pay for that education or not. Anyway, so leaving that aside, so that's a thing of uh, managing your liabilities, seeing who should take the loan, who should pay it back, and also in terms of not falling into a debt trap. So what are some debt traps? So if you have revolving card debt, you have EMIs, a lot of EMIs, which you're doing on this buy now, pay later type of stuff. You have car loans, which are excessive. You have personal loans, right? These are all things that are best avoided. So in a car loan, it's increasingly you have to ask yourself, saying, hey, why can't I take public transport or could I take Uber? If you think you need to buy a car, then why can't I buy it with my savings? Why do I have to take a loan? Right. So these are questions you can kind of ask yourself. So at this point, I'll just pause and see as to what are the questions on the liabilities part of uh, your balance sheet. So Madhuri, Abhishek, anyone, you want to ask any questions?
Nothing from me.
No, nothing
Abhishek?
from me either. So
Oh,
both Madhuri and I, we have, we have this no loan policy. So we've not taken any debt.
yeah.
So we don't know. So this is good to know, but this is not something that we actively use.
Yeah, so I just want to give you a few examples of when taking debt is a good idea, right? So because a lot of people feel I should never take debt, right? That also may not be 100% okay, because like you take a company, companies always look for debt financing because they get tax breaks and things like that, and debt financing is better than equity financing for companies. So I'll just give you an example of when even as a senior citizen, it might make sense to take a loan if you can get it and you can get it on reasonable terms. So, for instance, a friend of mine lives in a house which he wants to get out of and sell at some point. And he wants to move into an apartment. Okay, so the house is in Delhi, the apartment is in Gurgaon. Now, the apartment, this person is reasonably wealthy, so the apartment is a pretty fancy apartment, a penthouse, and so on and so forth. So it costs quite a lot, right? Now, so there are two ways that he could have done this. One is that he tries to sell the house while he's still living in it, and then it basically means that he may get a lower price because he's not able to do up the house and get it ready for sale, um, and stuff like that. He may not find the right buyers. He may be in a distressed situation, like just I got to get rid of this house because I want to buy this other house, stuff. So, or he could say, okay, I'm going to, uh, rent this, move into a rental, do this place up first, and delay the purchase of this other apartment that I want to. But that's not possible because this other apartment he'll lose it if he doesn't pay up. So he takes a loan, buys the other apartment, um, pays interest for this time period, and then sells the old home and repays the loan. So these are some things called bridge loans, right? So yeah, so there are situations where taking loans might be a good idea. Right? Same way, if there is a person who decides that they want to downgrade, right? Now, this is a question of upgrade your housing, but you might want to downgrade. Like, so you live in a really nice home, but your children have moved out, you're growing old, you have this home that you want to get rid of, and you want to move into a senior facility, but then you have to buy into that senior facility. You don't necessarily have the cash, but you would get the cash when you get sell your, like home that you are living in. So in these kind of situations, again, taking a loan might be good, whether you're upgrading, downgrading. So I'm just saying that, one shouldn't have a sort of very Puritan view saying all debt is bad and I'm never going to take debt. Does that make sense?
No,
Abhishek?
no, totally.
Yeah.
No, thank you for that.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to assets. On the liabilities. Of course, as you can see, there is some recording that's done. What's the maturity date? What's the rate? What's the amount outstanding? Who's the owner? What's the EMI that you're paying? And you could put remarks. Now, it also may be possible for you, depending on the terms of the loan, depending on how interest rates move, for you to be able to refinance your loan, right, at a cheaper rate. So if you've taken a housing loan, you may be able to refinance it, right? So those are things you have got to keep in mind on the liabilities. Now, moving to the assets, so what you want to include in your balance sheet is entirely up to you, whatever makes sense to you. Let's say you have an extremely expensive painting that you bought in there. You might want to include that and put a value in it. Maybe you're going to sell it, maybe you're not going to sell it, and stuff like that. So things like jewelry, all that kind of stuff. So it's up to you, what you want to include and what you don't want to include. But it's a good idea to include things like real estate, insurance, like you might have an annuity payment besides your mutual funds, things like your public provident fund. You may have, some assured insurance and so on and so forth. And then also have a column on whether that particular item is liquid or not. Now, I particularly have a bias if I want to secure and enjoy my retirement to move towards more liquid assets, right, which require little management, right? Because if I end up owning 3, 4 homes all over the country and all this kind of stuff, then, or maybe internationally, then I have to manage them. That creates its own overhead. And now, like if you want to travel and stuff like that, you can get really luxurious things which you don't have to manage. You just book it for a week, 2 weeks, whatever it is, have a great time and, come back, right? So there's another saying that you can't eat your house, right? So there are quite a few people who are house rich and cash poor. Right? So this is a bit of a problem because if you want to enjoy your retirement, if you have a very large house, but you're always strapped, you're thinking, hey, can I go on that safari? Can I make that trip? Can I, go to a fancy restaurant? If that's what you enjoy, then you're always worried about, do I have enough? While that asset that you have, your house, is just sitting there, right? And you don't think of ever monetizing. Maybe it's an ancestral property. Maybe you feel that, you need to be there for your children, leave it for your children and all that. So one key thing on your assets is liquidity and simplicity, and also what will happen when you pass away, right? Because today, I don't know if the statistic is correct, but they say that 86% of uh, matters which are pending in the civil courts in India are family disputes over property, right? So these are some considerations that you can take. But here now, if we say, okay, this person has his primary residence, so he doesn't have any real estate that he has for investment purposes. It's not liquid. The value is 1.5 crores. Now, this unrealized income is a very important component, right? So he estimates that this is going to, in the next year, appreciate at 2%, right? So he gets an unrealized income of 3 lakhs, right? He's not staying in it, so there's no realized income. And in the unrealized income, he's taken out things like property taxes, maybe whatever, so maybe a little more. So he could fine tune it, who's the owner and so on. So why this unrealized income is so important is that very often I've seen people, especially retired people, who don't have a salary. So they always say that, look, I need to live off my dividends, or they get into annuity funds as a salary replacement, right? According to me, that's a bad idea. Okay. Because you should, like if you put your money, like we discussed in the last session on asset allocation into, say, SAFE, which could be in arbitrage funds, and then in meet the market and beat the market, then you can always withdraw money as you need it from your SAFE, right? But if you keep looking at only your realized income, then you'll always be, because see, if you have a corpus, uh, slowly through your retirement and as you age, ideally you want to dwindle it down, because nobody's going to give you a medal, maybe your heirs will, if you die with a huge amount of money, right? So whatever gives you pleasure, if donating money gives you pleasure, do that. If you feel that, you know, which of course I don't believe in, but you might, that if you've committed many sins in your life and you feel that by going to Tirupati and giving some money to Tirupati, Balaji will be very thrilled, and he will give you a better afterlife, then do that. I mean, whatever meets your kind of thing, right? So, but broadly speaking, if you categorize everything in your assets, okay, and then put some notes on it. Like now, if you take your primary residence, right? So where are the title deeds of this? What happens when you uh, pass away? Like, uh, what is the thing of the society? How do your heirs transfer it? Like, in Delhi, at least, there's something called mutation and stuff like that, right? So these are things, especially if your children are overseas and stuff like that, they have no idea about India. It's pretty complicated stuff, right? So they should know about these things. And you can, these days with technology, you can just put a link in the remarks and put as many documents as you want in that, on that drive, and that will readily be available. So it's a one-time painful exercise which you have to keep updating, but it's pretty good. So in my own case, for instance, I get a superannuation amount, very small amount of 1,464 rupees every month from Citibank in India through the Life Insurance Corporation, because Citibank had bought a superannuation policy from life insurance company, and this will continue till my death. And on my death, there will be a lump sum payment of about 1,45,000, which will go to my heirs, right? So now the thing is that this whole process, I know it because while I'm alive, I know all this stuff, right? I know what the policy number is, which office handles it. Every 5 years, I have to give a life certificate to prove that I'm living. Otherwise, the 1,464 will stop. All these. So I'm just going through this example because, everybody will have some quirks like this, and as you go on, they'll build up, right? So you can keep adding on to this and make this as comprehensive as you want. As I've been talking to some of my friends, I find that they have done an extraordinary job of, making really comprehensive balance sheets and records and notes, and they keep them really updated really well, especially in complex situations. Right? So that's something that I highly recommend. Now, in things like mutual funds, right? So they're liquid, he's 26.6 lakhs, he has unrealized income, and so on and so forth. He has some realized income because he sold some stuff and all that in this total income. Now he's migrating to a thing that we discussed in the asset allocation thing. So he's put that as a remark. in there so that it reminds him that he's trying to do this. And say whenever he updates this, he say, hey, did I do that or did I not do it, etc. Right? You can see here that there are 3 entries for mutual funds because one is the owner is Ashok Kumar, the other is the wife, and the third person is the daughter. Right? Okay. So again, let me pause here for a little bit to see if there are any questions on anything I've said so far. Abhishek, Madhuri.
On the unrealized income part for mutual funds, how do you arrive at that?
Yeah.
Because
Oh,
I easily understand how realized income is because you sell it, you have that cash.
right. Okay. So let me tackle that. So that's pretty easy. So if you look at the value of your mutual fund, say you invested X number of units at Y price, so what's called the net asset value. So let's say you invested 10 lakhs, right? So now when you're preparing this, because you're invested a while back, your unrealized income could be positive or it could be negative. Suppose the fund went down, the mutual fund that you invested in, your NAV will be lower than what you invested, and that 10 lakhs may be 9 lakhs 90,000, right? In which case, your unrealized income will be 10,000 negative, right? While if the NAV went to 120, then, or it became 12 lakhs, okay, then your unrealized income would be 2 lakhs, right? So that's how you get your unrealized income, right? For mutual funds or stocks or whatever, right? Okay. Anything else? Madhuri, you, anything?
No, nothing. I think my question was the same regarding unrealized for mutual funds and stocks. It's not the amount we have invested, but it's the value of what it is as on date. Is that right?
Yeah, less. So take the value at the start of the year or your planning period and at the end of your planning period. The difference between those two values is the unrealized income, not the total value of the investment.
Got it.
Okay. So it's the delta, not the actual value. Right. So in that particular year, let's say there was a really bad year, like stocks went down 60%, right? Then you're going to have a huge hit on your unrealized income, right? Okay. And your unrealized income is also, see, this is when you realize that income, most likely you will pay some tax, right? So if you've been investing for a long time, like I have, my unrealized income is quite high, right? But if I want to do my unrealized income for a particular year, then I've got to take the unrealized income at the start of the year, the unrealized income at the end of the year, take the delta and put that in my thing for a year. So the idea of this, so you can have separate columns, you can have unrealized income at the start of the year, end of the year, difference, if you want to make this more correct and accurate if for your purposes. But in my case, why I did this way was that I was trying to say that this person has actually, a pretty healthy total income, so of about 13 lakhs, 31,568. But of that, the realized income is very low. It's only 26,000, right? So if the person was, and in this particular case, he has an unrealized, realized income which was negative. So this person could think, hey, I'm in really bad shape, right? Like I have only 26,000 rupees to spend for the entire year. But actually the person has 13 lakhs, right? So that was the purpose of doing this unrealized income, realized income, kind of thing. So is this sort of clear?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now let's come to PPF. Now PPF is a very interesting sort of asset class. A lot of people swear by it, because it's government, you trust the government, it's tax deferred, um, you don't pay tax, it's locked in, but not totally locked in. I mean, that's why I put semi here, so you can withdraw some of it after 4 years, and there's some rules and all that kind of stuff. So, a lot of people say, and this is like wisdom passed down from the years, that you must have some money in public provident fund. Okay. So now, so my father also told me, that you must have some money in public provident fund. So I did, but then I realized that this was not very good, because if I look at my safe money and I put it in an arbitrage fund, like arbitrage mutual fund, then it's liquid. I can get it at 2 days' notice, right? It'll be in my bank account. The return I get is somewhat higher, right? Even after accounting for the 15% or 10% tax that I pay, right? So the thing which trumps PPF for me personally is the fact that this arbitrage fund gives me liquidity with almost the same after tax return, or maybe better, slightly better, right? And then the question is of safety. Now, of course, the public provident fund is kind of guaranteed by the government or State Bank of India, which is pretty safe. Arbitrage funds also, interestingly, are very safe, because people don't understand this about mutual funds, is that if your mutual fund company goes bankrupt, okay, unlike a bank, your money is not at risk, because these units are owned for you in trust. So all that happens is that other asset management company is appointed to manage these units for you, right? You don't lose the money. Okay. So this is an important thing to understand, that mutual funds are pretty safe. Now, there is investment risk, market risk and all that, but there is no bankruptcy risk. Okay. Okay. So that's this thing about PPF. Right. I'm just taking a few asset classes and talking about them, which are the common ones. So in addition, just to the mechanics of preparing the balance sheet, uh, it's more important, like I said all along in these sessions, to understand the psychology and why are you doing this, and what lessons can you learn, and what behavior change will you do based on this mechanical exercise of preparing the balance sheet, right? Okay. So again, let me just stop here, and if there are any comments on, what I just said about the psychology, PPF, or anything else.
So I literally got the same advice regarding PPF, and I have invested in it, thinking that it's a very safe and a very reliable kind of an instrument. But yeah, I mean, I do get that it is locked in and it's not immediately liquid and things like that. But would you suggest not even just going into it and rather just sticking to like an arbitrage fund?
Yes, personally, I would do that, but I would like you to think about it and do what actually feels good to you, because I am, borderline excessively simple. Like, if that makes sense. Because I like to have as few assets classes as I can, so that I don't have to manage, because if PPF, then there's one more account, then, I have to keep track of it, then somebody has to do something with it. So if it serves a purpose, by all means, but just because, oh, it's good to have a PPF, is not a good enough answer for me, personally. And because I'm so much into simplicity, right? So like, for instance, I don't have too many credit cards. I don't have too many bank accounts. Like it might surprise you to know that in the US, I do not have a bank account. I have very substantial assets in the US because my brokerage account gives me everything that I need. I have check writing, I have everything. So I said, why do I need a bank account? Now, I would need a bank account if I took a loan or a mortgage, but I'm not staying in the US. I don't see that as a need at this point in time. So I don't have a bank account, and I just have two credit cards, one from my broker and one from another bank, and one debit card from my broker and check writing from my broker. So it's so simple. So all I'm saying is that even if your net worth is extremely high, right, you can choose simplicity. Now you can choose complexity also. And often I've asked myself that because I'm so much on simplicity, am I losing on performance? Right? Because I could have these structured assets and investments and, buy unlisted stocks and, to have all this private wealth advisors telling me about alternative investment funds and PMS and, all kinds of things. But I have tried a few of those, not found them exceptionally good, very hard to choose, definitely increase a lot of complexity. Like filing my tax returns becomes much harder if I have all these things because I have to wait for something called K1s and all this kind of stuff. For me, the return that I get from the simplicity is good enough, right? Then I'm saying, why should I be more complex? So this reminds me of a conversation that I had with a friend of my father-in-law. And he was telling me, he listened to me about, how stocks were good and mutual funds and all that. But then he said, I want to tell you something, that I'm like over 80 and I have for years just invested in fixed deposits with one bank. And that's what I like to do, right? Because I understand it and it gives me adequate money for my needs. And I love playing golf and I have a few expenses. This covers it and I'm set, right? So now in this particular case, the simplicity was losing performance in a big way, right? But it worked for him, right? So he said, look, I don't really need to save for my heirs and all that kind of stuff. I understand this. I have peace of mind. So I said, yeah, absolutely. If that works for you, it's great. You don't have to worry about performance, right? And stuff like that, right? But I think always all of us have to worry about understanding and simplicity, right? So I'll often tell people don't fall into traps, right? And there's so many, like yesterday I was at a tea with some Navy people, like ex-Navy, because my wife is from, her father was in the Navy and they have these Navy kids or whatever party, right? And there was one lady had uh, who had been through a divorce and, she had a daughter and she showed me an ad of some land in a place called Dapoli, which I don't even know where it is, but somewhere in Maharashtra, right? And, that land was available at some EMI of something. So she was asking me, should I buy this land? So these are things which, especially I find older women, who may have been widowed or, living on their own, to be very gullible and very, I mean, people actually target them and prey on them, like, and sell them all kinds of rubbish, like a tea plantation, or some other kind of thing. So please do not fall for such traps. Keep it simple. Be in things like mutual funds and stocks, and mutual funds rather, not stocks, because stocks are pretty complicated stuff. And single stock investing has its own risks. And stay with those kind of things. Now, also asset classes like gold, right? Now, where would you put gold? I mean, gold is not safe. Gold is in beat the market type of thing. So if you like gold, you want some diversification, etc., maybe you want to invest in gold. But you can, with rebalancing and various other things, achieve whatever you wanted to achieve without going into commodities like gold or oil or wheat futures or soya bean futures or whatever, right? So some people dabble in foreign exchange trading. All, in my opinion, quite unnecessary, right? So, but you know, you got to do what works for you, right? Okay, so let's move on to this other class here, where you can see this person has something called sum assured insurance. Now, this, according to me, is another big trap which people should not fall into. So one of the persons that I was advising, they have this policy where they pay about 3 lakhs, roughly, maybe a little more, over 10 years as premium annually. So they pay 30 lakhs of premium. Okay, after they pay this for 10 years, then for the next 10 years, they get 2 lakhs a year as assured income. There is some small death benefit which they get in case they die. And for the next 10 years, they get this 2 lakhs, and at the end of on the 20th year, they get 52 lakhs, an additional 50 lakhs. So, okay. Now, to a lay person who doesn't do the maths, this seems fine. I'm getting 74 lakhs. I put in only 30 lakhs, right? So I'm getting 70 lakhs and I put in 30 lakhs. So, I'm getting double my money back. I'm getting a death benefit, you know. So what's the problem in this? The problem is they aren't calculating the time value of money, right? And if you do that, I think, the return is something like 4%, right? So these things are traps. And then now this person, if they want to get out of this policy, they can't, because the surrender value is terrible. There is something where they can make this policy paid up, but the agent won't tell you that, right? Because he wants you to keep paying the premiums, right? So now there's this interesting discussion. And finally, it will get resolved. This person will not pay any more premiums. Okay, their benefits will reduce. And whatever money that they were paying in the premiums, they will invest in these mutual funds and they'll be fine, right? But this, now, why is this a trap and why is this sold? Because of commissions. Because the commission is as high, it used to be almost 35% of the first year's premium went to the agent who sold you the policy, right? I think now it's down to 15%. But still, it's a lot, right? So if you are a bank person, sometimes these bank people who are selling this don't even themselves do the math. They think they're selling something good, right? But they have targets to meet, right? So some of them, I often ask them, would you sell this to your mother, right? And that kind of is a very embarrassing question. So I've stopped asking that. But, because, and I find too, that one, that the people are clueless. They don't know what they're selling. And the other is that they're very bright and prudent, but they feel, sab karte hain, to why shouldn't I also do it, right? And I have a target to meet, right? And at least the person is getting, so you can rationalize in whichever way you want, right? But these are not very good. Okay, so that's what I want you to think about. Then you have stocks, yes, like people like to do, uh, trading stocks. It's great fun, like, okay, this thing went up, this thing went down. I'm looking at this, I'm getting tips on WhatsApp saying, oh, like, this company just announced that they won an order from some place. And, so people have a lot of fun, especially when they retire, right? This is like a game. And quite a few people, I say, if you enjoy this game, allocate a certain amount of money and play the game. This is like stock market is the biggest casino in the world, right? You don't need to go to a casino. You can just gamble on the stock market, right? And there's so many products like, blackjack, roulette, and craps, and, all this. So you have futures, options, structured products, this, that. So there's a variety of games that you can play on the stock market. Okay. Uh, but if you think you're going to do this to make money, almost in like in the casino, almost nobody makes money. The house always wins. Now, who's the house in the stock market? The house is the brokers and the government. Because the government gets securities transaction tax every time you trade. Right? So now, what are you doing when you're using mutual funds? You are actually paying the mutual fund company to do the trading for you. Right? So even if you buy an index fund, without paying taxes, because when you go in and out, you pay taxes and all that. So all this is happening behind the scenes for you. You're not paying brokerage, you're not paying securities transaction tax, you're paying a management fee. Okay, which is fairly low. Right? Which is why I prefer mutual funds, index funds to stocks. Right? Now, just as in real estate, like I also don't like real estate as an investment, but if you're very good at it, right, you can buy, you know, a highway is going to be constructed here, you buy some land, the value of the land grows up, and you're very good at it, right? Like you buy a home, which is a fixer-upper, you fix it up, and then you sell it, right? So some people are very good at it. Some people are very good at picking stocks. Then by all means, they should do it. But I'm talking about the average person, right? Then I already talked about my superannuation policy. So here, one of the reasons for putting it there is putting links to it so that people know what to do when I pass away and stuff like that. Okay. So in the notes, I've said that unrealized income is the appreciation that you have not realized. To understand the income you make in a year, you need to add realized and unrealized. Sort of a little bit of a confusing note. I probably need to make it a better, but it's better, because the difference in a year between the unrealized is not very clear here. It's better to have liquid assets unless the return you get is much greater because the asset is not liquid. Right. So suppose, for instance, you invest in a startup, right? Now that's not liquid, right? Your investment in a startup, and it comes much later, right? And you're gambling that that startup is going to be successful, but it may be wildly successful, right? Then it makes perfectly sense to invest in that startup or have some amount of money that you're going to invest in startups, because if, like the normal saying in angel investing is like, if one of your 10 startups that you invested in is a home run, then it'll pay for all the 9 that failed, right? And then, so it's up to you, right? So any questions or anything you feel that I've missed out on this asset part?
No, I think no questions from me.
No
Abhishek?
questions from me as well. All clear.
Okay. So now let's move on to the protection part. Right. So let's come to the protection that you want to buy in case you die and early and you don't have, I mean, like, so then people who depend on you are a bit in the soup, right? So the best policy that you should buy is what's called a term life policy, and not any other kind of life insurance policy. No endowments, term life policy also with no frills, right? So something where you buy a policy from a life insurance company, which is stable, has a good claim paying record, and is cheap. And so now when you buy a term life policy, you have to decide that by when is it okay for you to be self-insured, right? So this question of buying insurance is you're getting insurance from a third party, or you can be self-insured, right? So if by the age of say 55 or 60, I have enough money that my heirs will not be in trouble, then I don't need any life insurance, right? Because this is not a game that I'm playing, that I'm betting on how long am I going to live. Therefore, let me see, whether this insurance makes sense for me or not, right? This is a thing where I'm saying that, okay, uh, because the insurance company is working on the fact that many people purchase insurance, and therefore the price of purchasing that protection is very low relative. Of course, the probability is also very low, right? See, most people will not die early, right? So that's the whole life expectancy thing and all that kind of stuff. But you cannot count on that, right? Because you may have an unfortunate event and you may die, right? So it makes sense for you to have that protection. That's why insurance works. But beyond a point, you don't need that protection, right? So at least in my wife's case and my case, what we did, so we were covered with Citibank, where I worked earlier. They had benefits, so I had enough of a life cover. But when I left Citibank, that life cover stopped, right? And I was still 40. My son was in ninth grade, right? So we needed life insurance, right? If something happened. So we both decided to take $750,000, like $750,000 each, life insurance. And the premium for me was $330 a year because I was male and I had not perfect health markers. And for Anita, it was like 250 because she was a woman, she was slightly younger, and she had better health markers, but as low as that, right? Now 330 and 250, we don't even think about, right? It's like rounding in terms of expenses that we have. And now we got the solid protection, giving us a lot of peace of mind, right? Now, in the US, there is this thing that if you leave a job for 60 days, you are covered by old policies. But so, and then buying a new policy is easy and all that. But for quite a few people, it might make sense, even if you have employer coverage, to buy supplemental coverage, or so that when you leave, there's no this thing. So my thing is that having at least 1 crore of life insurance for younger people should be done. Now you don't just get 1 crore because the insurance companies want to make sure that you have some income kind of stuff, and you're not going to just buy insurance because and then kill yourself, or you have like cancer or something, you're going to die. You just buy, because in quite a few cases they give you this insurance without doing a medical, right? So although you have to give affidavit that you're okay, and then if they suspect that you defrauded them, then getting the money might be pretty hard, or you may be denied your claim, right? But leaving all that aside, so in my wife's and my case, we decided that we would buy this cover till the age of 55, right? Which was why the premium was so low, right? Because we felt that by 55, our son would have gone through college, we would have reasonable assets. So why I don't need that cover beyond that, right? So you need to think about what type of policy you want to buy and when and how and stuff like that, right? So you will see here, it's will cover till 65, no frills, something what the premium is like, right? And when the maturity is and all that, right? And you'll see that there's a policy both on Ashok Kumar and on the wife, right? I'm assuming that the wife is working also or has some income, right? Um, so, and I'm not very sure, but I also feel that uh, if the wife is even a homemaker, uh, should be able to buy some insurance, some amount. I don't know if the insurance companies give that, but uh, I think it's like homemaking also should be paid actually. Right? But anyway, that's a different debate for another day. But uh, so uh, anyway, we covered this life part of it. The other key category is health, right? So quite a few people very soon they should buy health policies, okay, because the waiting periods, the premiums are not that much when you're younger, and then these policies continue and till you die, right? So they of course increase the premiums as your age increases, but they're typically less than getting in at a later point. And then getting in, you have to go through a medical and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff, maybe, right? So there is this family floater thing, which you can get. And let's say this person has it for 5 lakhs. The premium is about 25,000. It has. Now, it's also very important to look at getting a policy, preferably with no room supplements. Because one of the problems in health insurance policies is if you get a policy with a room supplement, then when you say, suppose you need a heart bypass or you need a knee surgery or something, then if you get admitted to a lower level room, then you will get a lower level doctor and lower level care. So everything in India is tied to the type of room that you are in. And the room supplement does not just impact your. So suppose you say, okay, forget it, right? I will book an expensive room. I have seen people doing this because, whatever the extra, I'll pay it. The insurance will pay. But no, that room supplement is applied to everything in your bill. So if you were only allowed to go to XYZ type of room and you paid 20% extra and went to ABC room, then your entire bill will get that haircut of 20%, including the surgeon, the fees, everything, right? So that is a huge haircut. So the other important thing when you buy a healthcare policy, read the fine print carefully and also see what is covered, what is not covered, what is excluded, etc. Because sometimes what happens is that you have these things like modern treatments, they're called, So quite a few of these modern treatments are excluded, right? Then why have you bought this insurance? Right? Okay, because you would want, say, suppose you need a knee surgery, you want robotic surgery, or you want low incision surgery. Now that's classified as a modern treatment. And if your insurance policy excludes it, you're not going to get reimbursed for it, right? So it's pretty important to look at this. And then you have this thing called a super top-up, right, policy, where there is a deductible of say 5 lakhs, and then you're covered on a family floater basis for say 25 lakhs. So now if you get an illness like say which requires dialysis, or you need chemotherapy or whatever, which are expensive treatments, then, the whole thing is that, these kind of policies could be very helpful. And the premiums are very low because there's a high deductible, right? So for me and my wife, and, we are like, I'm in my mid-60s, and so is my wife. For a 25 lakh cover, we are paying about 21,000 rupees a year. Again, which is peanuts, right? We had to go through a medical and all that to get this policy, but we did that. And, now it's been some 7-8 years that we've had this policy. And, we are covered. Now, because I'm now eligible for Medicare in the US, so maybe I don't need this policy, but my point is that, look, if say, for instance, I get some condition which requires chronic care here, it's not necessary that I want to relocate to the US just because I have Medicare, right? And in the US, in there. So these kind of things can be useful. Okay. So I've said this about modern treatments and no room limits and what the deductible is, right? So for people to think about these and see whether they're adequate. And now you have, things like Policy Bazaar, you have this thing called Ditto, etc., where you get pretty good advisors. And if you're knowledgeable, you can ask them a lot of questions and see what kind of policy is right for you and how much should you pay. Okay, so one more thing on the insurance, and then I'll kind of wrap this part up, and then we'll see what kind of questions there are, if any. So the other category is general insurance, right? And most people, some of them take homeowners insurance and fire insurance and things like that on the property that they own, or burglary insurance if you have a lot of valuables and all that. But generally speaking, I think this general insurance as a category is not very well understood or penetrated in India. Um, and most people prefer to self-insure. But if you have things which are very valuable, you live in a relatively not so secure area where there have been burglaries and things like that, you can consider insuring yourself against whatever perils that you want to insure for, right? You could get flood coverage, earthquake coverage, there's a whole bunch of coverages that you can buy. But here I'll just talk about cars. So now the car thing was very interesting. So like most people, for many years, I would just buy a comprehensive car policy and said, yeah, the premium's okay. It's fine. Like I have this, say, 20 lakh car, so paying like 40,000 or 60,000 a year for insurance, no big deal, like just pay. But then I started asking myself, why am I paying this? Right? Because if there is a little dent, some bump, somebody bumps you, I don't go and claim it against insurance, because there's not a probability that I'm going to have a major accident and have my car total or something is, according to me, fairly low in a place like Bombay or whatever where I live. And my driver is a reasonably good driver. So while it can happen, but it's unlikely. And we don't do that much highway driving and all that kind of stuff. Once a year, like we do a trip to Delhi, and back. But that's about it. And I live in a very secure area. So the chance that my car will get stolen is pretty low. Right? And we don't go and park in some. And mostly my driver is there. Right? So I estimated that the risk was quite low, and I would like to self-insure. Now, there's a legal requirement that I have to get third-party liability coverage. So that is the only coverage that I could get. So now my premium is around 9,000 rupees a year for a Toyota Altis. While if I took comprehensive, it would probably be about 25,000. So I'm saving 16,000, which is not a great amount, but why pay 16,000 extra if you don't need it, right? Based on your analysis. Now, after all this analysis, it could prove wrong and my car could get totaled or stolen, whatever. But I also have the capability, if that happens, to be the insurer, right? And pay for that, right? Pay for a new car, right? So keeping all those factors in mind, I make my protection choices, right? So what I'm trying to say is that if you are very deliberate, and there's no one size fits all, right? Just because I'm doing something, that doesn't make it right for you, right? Or you have to see your circumstances. But if you are pretty deliberate and you ask the right questions, and if you need, by all means, use a financial advisor, okay? But then have a knowledgeable discussion with that financial advisor. Okay. Okay. So any questions on the protection part, and then we'll open it up for any general questions. And if there are none, then we could probably end this session a little bit ahead of time.
I just wanted to make one remark. You mentioned about term insurance for homemakers. Today in the market, it is indeed available. I often get, calls from insurance companies telling I could also now get an insurance for my spouse.
Oh,
So it is indeed available now.
okay. That's great. Yeah, because it should be. And, people should consider insuring their spouses, um, or nowadays, of course, you could have house husbands as well, but, whatever it is, but, not just the earning member of the household. Um, you know, so it's pretty good that those kind of things are there because, if your spouse who is a homemaker uh, does pass away, it is very unsettling apart from the psychological thing and all that, but it's also unsettling from a financial standpoint because you have to make many arrangements, to which are financially expensive to replace the fact that you no longer have a homemaker. So the value of a homemaker is not realized. So there is no homemaker, there, unfortunately, people say, oh, okay, you just make tea and make some food, but what's the big deal, right? That's a very wrong and bad way of looking at it, I think. Okay, so as so in the area of life insurance, like, do you agree that term life is the right way to go? Or do you have any questions on that? Because people
I
will
don't.
sell you all kinds of things, whole life. If you don't die, you'll get so much money back. That's the most common thing. And people really fall for this. They're saying, yeah, I'm just wasting money. I'm just paying this money every year for term life insurance, and I'll get nothing back when I die. But if you think of it a little logically, does this make any sense? Right? When you buy fire insurance, do you get any money back if there's no fire? No, you don't, right? So why should you get money back if you don't die? So this is all ways for the insurance company to make money, for the agents to make money, and it doesn't make any sense for the individual. Right? So buy a higher amount of insurance, or and pay a lower premium, and then whatever you save, invest. Right? So that's the thing on life. And on health, be very careful that you buy the right policy. Like I told you about these room limits, just saying, buy it early, because there are waiting periods and all this kind of stuff. Don't gamble and say that let me wait. I don't need like health insurance. I'm 20, 25. What's going to happen to me? Right. I think COVID taught us a lot can happen. Okay. But apart from COVID, there are these kind of things which happen and it hits you know, when it happens. So just buy it. It's not that expensive. And later on, you may be denied insurance. Like there are lots of people I know who can't buy health insurance because, who will insure a person who, is highly diabetic, has like huge heart conditions, whatever, you know, you're just not insurable. You're not a good risk anymore, right? But if you've been paying the insurance company over many years, then whether you're a good risk or not, they have to insure you. That's the law, right? So that's the thing on health. And on general insurance, think what you need. I mean, there are lots of gimmicky insurances. Like one of the things I consider them gimmicky, you may not, but like this whole business of when you travel, right? When you're buying your ticket on air ticket, they'll say travel and some baggage insurance and some other thing, loss of baggage insurance and then flight insurance. Now, if you look at it, yeah, sure, I mean, you might lose your baggage, but how often do you lose your baggage? And how much of a problem it is? And like now this flight safety insurance, I mean, I think the airlines have an outstanding safety record. So unless you're paranoid, why would you be buying flight safety insurance? Then they'll send you some dengue insurance, some, like all kinds of insurance. Oh, it only costs 99 rupees. Why not buy it? Right? But to me, it's, yeah, why buy it? Just because it costs 99 rupees, I don't see why you should buy it. So there are so many, what quote unquote traps which are there, where they're all people coming up with gimmicky ways to extract money from you. So try and avoid those and focus on things which make sense. And by all means, please do as to secure a retirement and enjoy it. So the first session was on asset allocation, which is probably the most important. After that, making a balance sheet is pretty important. And we'll very quickly look at what we're going to cover in the rest. So the next session is on the spend calculator, which is very interesting because I've seen very few advisors who focus on how much you can spend. And this is very important if you have, through whatever means, you built a reasonably large corpus. And now you have relatively few years left to live. And, so knowing how much you can spend is really important. And it actually even applies before you retire, right? If you built a reasonably large corpus, because retirement, it's a good thing to talk a little bit about what does retirement actually mean. It doesn't mean that you retire and you pay golf and read books and essentially take sannyas and whatever. Like I've been retired for the last 20 years, but it's not something that I've not done anything. In fact, I've done a lot. It's just that I've done stuff which I want to do. I'm not worried about taking a 9 to 5 job where I have like a boss and a corporate and I have to make presentations, all this kind of stuff, right? So retirement is just freedom to do what you want to do, right? So in that also, so you could be retiring very early, like me, if you consider it that way. That doesn't mean that you don't do anything, but you're doing stuff. So, you can think about how much you can spend, how much do I need to save, how do you make a budget till the age of 90, and then what is the wealth index, and then this tracking and tasks and resources. So the last three we'll probably cover in one session. And maybe, I'll see how it goes, but maybe I can do the save and budget and spend it. We'll see how many sessions we need. But that's generally to give an overview of this whole thing. So any questions on the overall series or suggestions, or like, are you finding these useful and things like that?
Yes, extremely useful because no, it's not often that people are actually very candid about some of these products and all of that. And a lot of times it's driven by the commissions that they may earn, and hence they're selling you things which may not necessarily be good for you as an individual, right? So it's definitely very useful. I think it's extremely structured, and that's exactly the kind of the resource that people like me would be looking for, because it's not easy to come by. So extremely useful. So thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks, Manu. Abhishek, any comments?
No, I think I would say the same thing. Very useful. I start off at a privileged place where I don't really have any baggage that I'm carrying, so I don't have some of these bad products in my portfolio. So I can start right, and I can avoid making some of these mistakes that others have made. So but that, I mean, that's very important for me, and I think I'm getting great value from these sessions. So thank you very much for that, Sanjay.
Okay, so I'm going to stop the session. I'm glad that we finished about 15 minutes early. That's good. Okay.